I want to begin by sharing with you how I got interested in the 7 habits of highly effective people, because that doesn't sound like a topic that a mechanical engineer, or in my case, a material scientist really, would get interested in. And it's, I think, a kind of an interesting backdrop to what we're going to be doing today, and why I think as professors you will find this extremely helpful. My journey to focus with balance, this is really the challenge, isn't it? Because I want to really accomplish the things that God has laid out for me professionally, in my family life, in my social life. And at the same time, I want to do that with getting a reasonable amount of sleep and getting exercise and taking care of myself. And I can tell you, having been a professor for 44 years, having been a department chair of a faculty of 67 for whom I wrote annual performance evaluations and had long, detailed conversations with them, that this is a real challenge, I think, for almost everybody who works in a university environment. It's not a 40-hour week in most cases, and I think trying to figure out how to do the many things that are required and do it in a way that allows you to get that done in a reasonable amount of time is, I think, probably the single greatest challenge that I observed in the faculty that I had the privilege of leading as a department head. During high school and college, I learned to work hard, but I did not necessarily learn to work smart. You can sometimes really work not smart, but if you put in enough hours, you can still make it work, right? And I think a lot of times we compensate for not working smart by simply working hard, and maybe much harder than we need to. During my graduate school years, I began to realize that I needed to become much more focused and much more balanced in my life. Life is not a one-variable problem. And for those of you that don't do math, it means there's more than one important thing that you have to try to maximize, right? That's speaking like an engineer to say it's a one-variable problem, and you say, well, what the heck does that mean? I was able to secure my first tenure-track teaching position when I was 24 years old. I was an assistant professor with a wife, 2 babies, 1 month and 14 months old. And that was really sort of a critical challenge for me, because tenure track, as you know it, if you're at schools that have pretty demanding requirements to make tenure, and then having a brand new family with these little children and a wife who really needed my help and support, trying to balance my spiritual, my physical, my emotional, and academic goals became more challenging. I also began to understand that I had to trust God to make me productive in a reasonable amount of time, which I decided, you have to decide for yourself, I decided at the very beginning of my career, I'm not going to work more than 50 hours a week. Now, maybe that doesn't sound like such a big deal, but I was at a school where most people worked 80 hours a week. And I'm being compared, when it comes to tenure and when it comes to promotions and stuff, with people who do that. And I sort of decided at the beginning of my career, if it takes 70 or 80 hours a week to be successful, I don't want the job. I can go work in industry. I don't have to be a professor. And in fact, I had not intended to be a professor when I started my career. I was going to work in industry, and it was only my last year in graduate school that I thought being a college professor could offer wonderful opportunities to have a Christian influence. And so I ended up changing my direction, and I sort of I'll be a professor for 2 years to experiment and see if I could make it work and have a normal life. So I was really having to make early on decisions. While I was in my first job, I'd already been tenured, but we got a new department head, and he was really putting the pressure on everybody. He would give people things to do on Thursday and Friday, and he wanted them back on Monday, and it was his way of trying to make everybody work all weekend, because that's what he did. And after having told him no about 3 times, I have other plans this weekend. I went in and just offered, and I said, if this is what you want us to do, John, I'm not willing to do that. My priorities are God first, my family second, my job third. And if I can't do that in 50 hours a week, then I'll simply resign. I'll save you the trouble of firing me. And I really meant that. And he was, I don't think he was surprised, because he knew me well enough to know that that was not the case. And he said, well, you're very, very productive, much more than a lot of people, even in a lesser amount of time. So just do whatever you want to do. I thought that was a nice response. And so I got out. Well, he could have fired me. Now, I have to say, to be fair, this is 1971, and the job market wasn't real great in 1971. There was the big recession, and we had gone to the moon, and after we went to the moon, NASA laid off about 1 zillion people. But I thought God will take care of me, and he has. Well, fast forward 18 years down the road, I'm teaching at Texas A&M University, and I've been there 13 years, and they asked me to be the department head. I say department head and not department chair because if you know the difference, it's a much harder job. Department chair means you're sort of like a committee chairman. All the decisions get made kind of as a group. When you're a department head, everything falls on you. And with 67 faculty, we had the largest mechanical engineering department in the country. The fellow who had preceded me as department head had managed to misunderstand how the budget worked and got us into debt. Now, I didn't take the debt. We were $1 million in debt. Can you believe that? And we had $1 million in the bank, so to speak, in special accounts, and he managed to screw things up to the point that when I was offered the job, I thought, who would want this job? But the dean said that he would erase all of the debt. I told him I wouldn't take the job if he didn't do that. He erased all the debt, but he wouldn't give us back the extra $1 million that the guy had wasted. And I felt like it was an opportunity to serve in the department, and so I did that. But it was a lot of misgivings because it's a really difficult job. And I have an assistant department head, an associate department head. I have 3 division heads, and they just take care of the easy stuff. And when there's a real problem, particularly people problems, which is what most problems are when you're in administration, they would say, well, that's above my pay grade. Go talk to Dr. Bradley. And so I pictured myself spending a lot of time helping to make the department better, and I found out I spent a lot of time trying to resolve faculty being upset with each other and not getting along. They weren't usually upset with me, but I was left to be the person to try to resolve these things. At the very beginning, the fall of 1989, when I was beginning my job as department head, a book came out called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, nobody recommended this to me. I was just in a mall one Sunday when I'd gone to a conference that began on Monday and went a bit early. And so I saw it sitting posted. It said 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, what would you think when you see a book with a title like that? I wonder how many of those I do, right? I mean, I bought the book because I was curious. I thought maybe I do 2 of them or maybe I do 7 of them. I don't know. But if there's some I'm missing, I want to find out what they are. And so I bought the book. I read it, and I was really, really impressed. I did some of them, but I didn't do any of them probably at the level that I needed to be doing them. And it was really a godsend because I was at a place in my career with this new position that I was going to have to function at a much higher level than I'd ever functioned before. Well, about a year into the job, I'm trying to think, how could I get my faculty to do this? I could offer to buy them all the book, and you know how effective that would be. Hey, I want all of you guys to read this and then do what it says and get better. That would not sort of work very well for our professors. But I organized a advisory committee of people from the industry that hired our students. We graduated 250 kids a year. So we had about 200 companies that interviewed our students. And so I got some of the guys from those companies, like Exxon and Texas Instruments and 3M and major corporations. They were kind enough to send me vice presidents, pretty high-level people, to sort of say, how can we make our product, our students, better for your companies? And I got to talking, one of them suggested, well, have you ever heard of this training program called 7 Habits for Highly Effective People? And I said, no. Well, about 2/3 of the people on my committee said their companies had been using this, and I'd never heard of it before. I said, I only knew there was a book. And they said, oh, no, there was the training programs, and the book was the sort of outgrowth of that for people who didn't go to the training programs. And so I decided, they said, you should really try to have something like that for your professors. We're having it for all of our professional people in our company. And I thought, wow, that sounded really good. So I signed up to go to one of these 3-day programs, which companies were doing on site, but not at Texas A&M. We didn't know anything about it. So I flew up to Utah, went to a 3-day program, and it was exactly what my faculty needed. It was exactly what I needed as well. And so they said, if you want to have one, I said, I can't send people to conferences for $1,500 for a 3-day conference, plus expenses for travel. And they said, well, if you can't do that, then you can have programs at Texas A&M. You have to pay a licensing fee, and then you have to pay per person fee, which is for the workbooks that go with it. And it's all videos by Stephen Covey, taken at these $1,500 3-day conferences in hotels, and put on videos, and it's a really well done program. So I asked them if we were to do it at Texas A&M, how much would it cost? And they said, well, we've never had it done at a university before. And they said the normal price is $150 per person, and some much bigger amount of money for the contract. And I said, we can't afford that. And he said, well, what could you afford? And I thought, how low would they go? $70. And he said, okay, $70. And they gave us a price of $10,000 for our department, which I later asked them, would you mind making that for the whole university? Yeah, it's all right. You know, we were not their primary customers, right? It was industry people. But eventually, as other universities began to do this, they all got the benefit of that. They all got $70 per person, and it worked out really, really well. So I brought this back. I did it with my own faculty. I took the facilitator training. I did it for my own faculty. I made them come. I said, whether you think you need this or not, you need it. And so you've got to come. I didn't really make them, but I strongly encouraged them. And it was terrifically helpful to them. It was sufficiently helpful that I began to get requests from lots of faculty from other parts of the campus. And so I offered to do programs for them. We'd do a lunchtime program once a week at lunch for an hour and a half for the whole semester instead of 3 days all at once. And when we did that, I had people coming from all over the campus. I never advertised it. We always had 40 places. We always had it full. We always had a waiting list for 10 years. That's how much good word of mouth that God. And I share that with you to say the things we're talking about today, I think, have been tried and found to be very, very helpful. Now, a little bit more about the 7 Habits. The book, when it was first written, was turned down by the first 2 publishers it was taken to. Wouldn't you hate to be the people who passed on it? Why did they pass? Because the first publisher said, there's nothing new here. And Covey would have said, well, that's true. This is really sort of synthesizing the best of the success literature of the last 200 years. None of it's original with me. But he did a great job of synthesizing that. And the second comment was, not only is there nothing new here, this is just common sense. Is that true? How many of you have read the book? Some of you have probably read the book. Is it common sense? Yeah, but it's not common practice, right? You read that and you say, wow, that makes sense, you know, nobody disagrees with it. It's common sense, but it's not common practice. And so what I'm hoping we can do today, and maybe if you've read the book as I did, and I thought it was great ideas, but I really didn't follow through. And by taking the 3-day course that I took with Covey up in Utah, and then bringing that back to my own department, I found that it's not that hard to develop these habits, but reading about them is not developing them. And so what I'm hoping we can do today is to encourage you, motivate you, and get you pointed in the right direction to begin to do these things that I think can make a huge difference, not just in your professional life, but in your whole life. And I think as Christians, we're called to let it lead a balanced life. And so we need to be mindful of that and try to learn how to develop those kinds of habits. Okay, the power of vision. Wait, did I miss a slide in here? Okay, where are we going today? We're going to talk about the power of vision to begin with. This is really habit 2. We're going to do an overview of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And we're going to focus on habits 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to be talking about building a successful faculty career in research, in particular for those who are working for tenure or promotion to full professor. So that's where we're headed. Now, let's start with just a quick overview of what the 7 habits are. If I can get my cursor in the right place.
I remember my grandma's favorite story was about how everything cost 2 cents when she was young. But now, everything constantly got more expensive. And it was all because of the government. These uneducated pigs didn't know how to control prices. And when I was privileged enough to hear this story, her complaining would last for hours and hours. And that's exactly what reactive people do. They always focus on the things that they cannot control. It's not possible that a concept like inflation would exist And if it did, it's impossible that they wouldn't know about it. On the other hand, proactive people realize, look, even if my complaining were completely objective, it doesn't help me. So I'm going to focus on what I can control. If a proactive person owns a business where he sells a product, instead of focusing on how people these days don't appreciate good products anymore and how the government has horrible regulations, he focuses on how can I improve my product so my customers can't live without it. Do you realize how much responsibility, how much dedication, how much hard work comes along with asking that question? And what do you think our effort minimizing brain is going to pick as default? And that is exactly why most people focus on the things that they cannot control rather than focusing on the things that they can. Habit number 1 is be proactive. Now, imagine you're at a funeral, but this one's different from all the funerals you've ever been to. You're standing over the casket and you see yourself. What do you have to say about yourself? This is one of the most powerful questions you could ask. Are you doing the things in your life which are aligned with what you want to be able to say? Do you want to say that you are a good spouse? If that's the case, how does coming home and instantly being negative towards your spouse affect that? Do you want to be remembered as a person who added value to society? If that's the case, are you doing the things that will allow you to say that, or are you scared of failure and choose comfortable mediocrity instead? Almost every one of us will have to readjust how we live when we ask this question. Habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. Now, if I were to ask you, what are the most important things to you? The most common answers I would get would be either your well-being or your relationships, your family, your spouse, your children. You would never ever say organizing papers or watching TV. But how many of us spend more time organizing papers and watching TV than planning our nutrition and going to the gym or cultivating a healthy family environment? There's a horrible disconnect between what we say and how we actually allocate our time. Habit number 3 is put first things first. Now, imagine you're an author and I'm an author, and we both write interesting books, and we both have access to an audience of about 100,000 people. I read your book and I love it, so I decide to share it with my audience, and as a result, you now have thousands of people buying your book and reading your ideas. You see this and think, who is this guy? Let me take a look at his book. You start reading my book and think I have ideas that are valuable, so you decide to share it with your audience. And as a result, I now have thousands of people buying my book and reading my ideas. Notice how different this is from my creating a little creepy Amazon account, finding your book and leaving a bad review, hoping that this will deter a few people from buying your book, which will in turn somehow get them to buy my book. Habit number 4 is think win-win. Stop thinking of everything as a zero-sum game. For you to win, another person does not have to lose. Something I want my viewers to do is to subscribe to my channel. But you will never hear me say, well, I worked really hard, guys. I dedicated so many hours to this. Please subscribe. Look, who cares if I worked hard? Who cares if I've spent days creating this video? The real questions are, does it offer value to you? And why should you dedicate your time to subscribing when you could be doing anything else that you want? Habit number 5 is something that I try to use every single day with every interaction that I have and with every comment that I reply to, and it is this: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Now, imagine there are 2 people and a tree with 5 apples on it. They're both too short to reach the apples, but if one of them sits on the other's shoulders, he can reach all 5 of the apples. This is called synergy. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that you can't achieve this with everyone, but you should always be looking for opportunities to create synergy. With every synergistic opportunity you create, you can gather many more apples than you otherwise would by yourself. Habit number 6 is synergize. A man has been trying to cut down a tree for hours, and after a while his neighbor can't take it anymore, goes over and says, you know, if you sharpen the saw, you'll be able to cut it down faster. And the man replies, but sharpening the saw is going to take time. Now, we might laugh at this story, but we do the same thing all the time. We can't find 30 minutes a day, 4 times a week, to go to the gym. Our health deteriorates to a point where we're physically incapable of being effective. We can't read a book for 15 minutes a day and mentally stimulate ourselves. No, these things take too much time. And then we have the audacity to ask for little tips and tricks on how to be effective. It's like telling your engineer, don't worry about the foundation, where can we get the magic bricks that will float in the air? Habit number 7 is sharpen the saw. And these are the 7 habits of highly effective people by Stephen Covey.
That's actually on the internet. So if you want to share that with friends back at home, I got it off of YouTube. And I don't know if our notes have the YouTube address. Oh, they do have. Okay, so you have the YouTube address. Okay, so we're all finished now, and we can, no. Okay, the next thing I want to do is to begin by talking about, we're going to skip habit 1, but for our purposes today, we have only time to do 5 of them. Habit number 2 is what? Begin with the end in mind. Now, I want to share with you a video that I don't even remember how I happened to find this, but I eventually developed a program for college students. When I was department head, all my mechanical engineering students would come up and complain. When they came by just to complain about their professors, I would ask them if I could change one thing in the department, what would you recommend? And almost without exception, it was give less homework. We don't have any time for social life. We're just all dorks, you know, because y'all pile on the work so much. And I said, well, but if we gave you any less work, then you wouldn't pass the fundamentals of engineering exam and you would have wasted all this time. You couldn't be a professional engineer. So, but I said, the problem is not that we give too much work, it's that you are really, really inefficient about how you get your work done. And so I did something that was sort of interesting as an experiment. 2 days after grades went out in December, I had a letter go to all the parents saying that I was going to teach a course on 7 habits of highly effective students. And it was going to be tailored. It wasn't the program that's Covey's, but it had a lot of the same concepts. It really needed to be something that could be done in a much shorter time. And particularly on how to manage their time and how to develop clear sense of where they're going and what they're trying to do. So it got there. The letter came right after grades arrived. I had to say, when are the grades going out? And then I had my secretary send it out for 2 days later. And I had about 300 parents sign their kids up. Now, a lot of them came kind of, I'm only here because my parents made me come, you know. And I said, well, no, you're here because you made a 2.0 or a 1.5 grade point, and you've earned the right to be here. But it turned out that it was really so effective that I ultimately, with my son, developed a program that we actually had, you could buy it off of the internet, but we did live programs for students, and when we started doing it for the whole campus, not just for my department, we'd have 600 kids come. And almost all of them would come with a negative attitude, but they would almost always leave thinking, you know, I'm glad my parents made me come. And one of the things that I bought to go with that, and I don't remember how I found it, but it's a program called The Power of Vision. Because I think if you don't get your vision right, then it doesn't make any difference what else you do. If your vision is right, then the hard work you have is going to take you someplace you really want to go. But it's actually possible to work hard and end up at some destination that's kind of like, wow, how did I get here? This isn't really where I wanted to be. I want to tell you that 20 years ago, when I first bought this video, not quite 20 years ago, 17 years ago, it cost $850 for a 30-minute video. Now, I say that only to get your attention. This should be really good at that price, right? And I hope you'll like it. So we'll see. This is a guy named Joel Barker, who is sort of a very famous motivational speaker. And on this topic, I think he really nails it. Okay.